This movie is unironically fantastic, and I'm going to explain why. Hey there, this is your Math Doodle to my timeless hands, Doodlebot here with another video. And today, I'd like to talk about the 2005 Fantastic Four movie, and how I think it's pretty underrated. Now, I'm not saying this movie is perfect, it is clearly not, but it has so much love, and it's fun. I know that technically this is not how the Fantastic Four are, but to a lot of people, this was the first introduction to them. And yes, I know there was a Fantastic Four movie that came out in the 90s, but first of all, that was never officially released, so technically this was the first time anyone saw a Fantastic Four film. And what I mean that it has heart is that it does feel like a family film that's coming together. The origin-wise, it is not 100% the comics, but I still think that's good. Now, there is things I don't like the way they did Victor Von Doom, which I want to talk about in a little bit, but I do want to talk about the four first. I do love everyone's relationship. Everyone feels like a family coming together, because in this one, Sue and Reed are not together really. They're kind of in this wishy-washy type state, which I think is always kind of like how it is, even if they're married. Like Reed Richards, the actor who played Reed Richards, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Future me, his name is Ioan Gruffudd, which was really hard for me to even pronounce. In this one, he is a bumbling super genius who doesn't really think about his family and all that stuff. And I get that was a lot of people's complaints when this movie was coming out, that, he doesn't have a cynicism that Reed tended to have and all that stuff. But this was in the year 2000 when they didn't really understand how he was going to be. But they did get his brain right. They did get him being a super genius who doesn't really, think about everyone else that well. And also that, autistic side, pretty spot on. As someone who is autistic, that's good. We're not going to talk about the fact that in the comics he tried to cure autism. But he is goofy, he's sweet and all that stuff. And I know, again, that's not how he is in the comics, but this was a good beginning. But this could have been perfect. He could have played the comic accurate Reed so well. And the reason I know that is because later on in his career, he was able to play the type of cynical, dark humor, detached type genius in this show called Forever, where he basically played a immortal coroner. I know it sounds weird, but in that show, he played the comic version of Reed, basically. And just look at him. He looks exactly like Reed Richards. Then that gets me into Sue. I'm going to be very honest. I'm sorry to Jessica Alba, who didn't really have a lot to do in this film, that she was kind of eye candy for everyone else. She had her powers and she tried using them, but that was really about it. I wanted to find something that I really liked, and I kind of did. Maybe it's the fact that, she was the mother figure of the group, but even then, it wasn't as much as I would like, even back then when I was a kid. And that's where nostalgia can't save me. I know she was just eye candy for everyone else. Why did they have her get naked for her powers to work? I mean, I get why the real reason why is because, they wanted to show her body, and I get that. And I get in this version of the movie, her invisibility does not go through her regular clothes. So in the process, it makes sense, but it's still icky. Because in that scene where we saw that she had to turn invisible, that didn't matter because everyone else kind of went through. Now, with the other two, Johnny Storm, played by Chris Evans, I missed this, to be honest. The fact that, spoiler for Deadpool movie, the fact that we got to see him in that movie gave me so much memories of seeing him as Human Torch in this film. And the way he portrayed Johnny Storm was perfect in this film. His cocky, his arrogance, his kid-like demeanor was everything I wanted to see in Johnny Storm. And that is actually a good transition to the comic. Yes, I know people kept saying that, they didn't have his family-first type attitude that he gets when he gets older, but this was a beginning Johnny Storm. And he did technically want to protect his family, especially at the end when he's trying to save his family. And I thought that was amazing that after all his douchery and everything like that, he still went out to help his family. And that's what's really nice. And not just then, we get to see that literally when they were on the bridge and he saves that little girl, not knowing if he's going to be okay. And I love that even in the beginning, we get to see some of Johnny's good-natured heart hiding behind all that douchebaggery. And then we go into Ben Grimm, played by Michael Chiklis. I've kind of explained a little bit about him in the last video I made about the progress on the Thing's design, but he's the bleeding heart of this film. This is the Thing, no matter what. Even if everything was different, they made him exactly what we needed as the Thing. He is just a regular dude. Yes, he went into space, but besides that, he just, likes a cold beer, likes to originally smoke as they showed in this movie.
How bad is it? I used to smoke.
He just does normal things. And then when it showed his accident, this is the exact same thing we see with Ben Grimm. He's sad, he's annoyed, with frustrated. And I know some people got annoyed with his, ex-wife in this film, that she kind of just dumped him when he turned into the Thing. But I think that's actually good, that even though he was being praised for saving people, that the one that he was supposed to love the most abandoned him in this time of need. Because that would show that even though she was technically supposed to be his everything, he wasn't her everything. And it's sad. It's a sad truth. That's like, it reminds me of like people who get disfigured and their partner can't take it and leaves no matter what they do. And it's cool seeing his progression. I could talk about him all day. Him meeting Alicia, the blind lady. That's how I first knew about her. And how she technically sees him better than everyone else, even though she's blind. And I thought that was an amazing thing. Seeing Ben's transformation into the Thing, showing the progression of like what they've shown a lot of times in the comics of him wanting to have a cure for what happened to him, and in Reed trying everything he can to cure him, but can't. And sometimes Ben can't help it. He feels like he's not being appreciated, and that's like, technically how Ben can be. But then it also shows that part in the comics where he does get cured. That does happen. But it realizes he's no help to them if he doesn't have his Rock series. And I love that they do that progression in this film. They somehow put Reed and Sue's relationship growing in this film before they got married, to Ben accepting himself as the Thing, and Johnny learning to be a better person to help his family. Now, I was going to talk about Dr. Doom in this film. I'm going to be extremely honest. He looks badass. He looks awesome when he's Dr. Doom. But he is not Dr. Doom at all. Even though the other actors who played the Fantastic Four were really well casted. Like, the actor who played Reed Richards, looks identical to Reed. Jessica Alba, blonde lady, not really much to talk about. Johnny Storm, maybe didn't look exactly like him, but he had the acting chops for days. But then we go into the actor who played Victor Von Doom, Dr. Doom. They took away his origin, which again, I'm kind of fine with, but they kind of did change in the Fantastic Four. He was part of that change that I did not like. They made him one of the people that went into space and had a budding relationship with Sue, which I get they kind of have that in the comics, but it's never that, big. Like, occasionally he'll like her, in the Secret Wars, he kind of took her as his wife, brainwashed him, which is gross. But in this one, he's trying to pursue her, and instead of having his own country and, ruling it, he's just a business owner, and, he owns Von Doom Industry or something like that. And for what this is, and for the time, because of Spider-Man and the Green Goblin's, tycoon type character, I get what they were doing. And, it's trying to say that, being a business owner is the highest form a person can get, because he's rich, he has everything. I get it, but it kind of loses that mystique, because also, since Victor Von Doom went to space, he kind of like got all his powers there, which made me for the longest time think that he was also one of the people that went into space and got his powers, which, finding out his actual origin, is so sad. Because in the comics, Victor Von Doom is a dictator, a good one, which is interesting, but who basically is an alchemist. He uses magic and science together in his endeavors. But in this one, I guess he just has little magical electricity powers. He's basically Emperor Palpatine. And yes, I know, this version of Victor Von Doom is more in line with the Ultimate comics instead of the 616 version. But even in the Ultimate comics, he didn't get electricity powers. He still became the leader of Latveria in the Ultimate comics. So it's still, not that good. But when he gets the Doom armor, it does kind of feel more like Doom. He feels disfigured, so he puts on the helmet, which I just remembered that they did reveal that helmet came from Latveria, which is a good reference, but still not as good as I hoped it'd be. But I did like the fact that he was jealous of Reed this entire film. That's another thing I like. The connections between each characters. Even though I was talking about each one individually, I like them all together. Especially Johnny and Ben's relationship. They did that relationship so good. I am very worried but excited for what they're going to do for the new film, and I hope they get that relationship right. The way they felt like brothers in this film was perfect. because I have one of my own, and that felt so perfect and so beautiful. The fact that Johnny would act like a little brother, trying to mess with Ben every time, and Ben, slapping back, gonna go punch him, was fantastic. But it showed at the end of the day when Ben lost his powers, and it showed Johnny trying to still help him up and, show him that he cares still. Yes, they're gonna mess with each other. Yes, they're gonna fight, but they are still a family. I may have not liked Sue and Reed's real relationship. It never really felt real. Just felt like they kind of had to be together. Like she just kind of liked him and he just kind of threw everything aside. I didn't like it as much. But I did like Reed and Ben's relationship. That they have been friends for so long that they basically know each other in and out. And it hurts more when we see Reed still trying to have a life that he finally can have and still try to cure his best friend because he still feels terrible. But then we see that, crux of Ben getting tired and sick, and Victor Von Doom messes with him, saying that, oh, Reed doesn't care. Reed is just trying to, get what he wants and see they all have the cool powers. And it does get to the point that Reed and Ben tend to have a rocky relationship. But at the end of the day, they are best friends and they'll do anything for each other, especially Ben for Reed, even though technically Reed caused him to look like a monster forever, which in this movie, Ben does, get used to it. And yes, I talked about these characters, all together and how they are. Now, let's talk about who they are as people. I know that people were upset with this film because they're not superheroes. I know that they wear the bright colors and all that stuff, but something I will always show so people know is that the only reason why they're famous celebrities in the comics is because Reed feels horrible for what he did to his friends, mostly Ben, because everyone else seems fine with their powers, is because he feels bad. That's why he makes them celebrities, so they can at least have a joyous, easier life, even with what they have. But in this one, they don't really explain that. It just shows that Reed is kind of just in this building, and they're doing that stuff, and they're superheroes occasionally. Things are happening to them, instead of them going out for it, which I get. It seems like they're not, wanting to be superheroes. But that's actually a thing I actually did like, because they're not supposed to be superheroes. I know it seems like I'm flip-flopping, but it's because I go back and forth on whether I like it or not. But I go back to liking it because of how sincere this movie still felt, even with all the inaccuracies to the comics. I'm not one to be someone like, oh, it can't be different or it has to change. I actually like some of the changes. I don't like Dr. Doom, as I said. Dr. Doom was a terrible choice, but I do like some. Like how this version of the Fantastic Four suits work. I love that they changed it, that the reason their suits can morph like them is because the suits were affected when they got affected by the cosmic rays. So it's just kind of like, oh, because we were wearing this while we got the powers, that means that these will act like us, which I find it cool. I don't know why. It just seems like a cooler reason for them to wear their Fantastic Four suits than just Reed just figuring out a way to make cloth that can do everything, if that makes sense. But that's just me. I know a lot of people like the older version. Now, again, this movie is not perfect. It has a lot of flaws, but it's so sincere and fun. Even though I literally said it is not accurate to the comic. You feel what they were going for, especially with certain characters like Ben and Johnny and Reed and Ben's relationship. I am so sorry that Jessica Alba did not really get to play a good Sue Storm, but I still think she did as good as they let her. And besides that, I do love the costumes they had for it. It made me actually surprised when I got older that the Fantastic Four have a logo on their chest and not on the side. They don't have that little indent down like this movie. But I love that they had the blue and the black, and it felt like it was for them. This is the movie for them. That was nice. But those are just my thoughts on this film. I know people are going to say that, oh, it was terrible. This was nothing like the comics, and this was nothing like the source materials. But there was really good stuff in this movie that I can't ignore and say that this movie was terrible. If you don't have nostalgia and you don't like the movie, that is completely fine. Not every movie is going to appease you, but I can't get enough of enjoying this film. It is something that I would go back to and watch and make me want the new film that's coming out to be what the Fantastic Four completely needs to be. Look at the good stuff from this film. Find all the bad stuff. And then look what didn't work and then just put in the good stuff. That's what I'm hoping for the new film. And that's why I wanted to look back on this. Because it had good stuff. But again, those are just my thoughts. What did you think of the film? Did you like it? Did you not like it? I'd really like to know. Before we continue, sorry for the footage being reversed and kind of weird. I try to go through the copyright system a lot, but they kept blocking me, so I had to find a new method. I apologize. It doesn't really make sense because they didn't do anything for the first movie, so I don't understand why they are doing it for the second movie, but this is what I had to do. Sorry. This movie had so much potential, but was it good enough to be fantastic? Let's talk about that. And today, I'll talk about Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. Oh my god, it's been a while since I talked about the original movie, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to talk about the sequel at all. Not because I didn't enjoy it or I just didn't want to, it's because I didn't know what to say, to be honest. I've already explained so much of what I thought about each character and how they were portrayed in the last film, so I wasn't sure if I was even going to do that for this one. But ever since the new Fantastic Four trailer came out with their Silver Surfer, I was like, you know what? Let's go back to the original and talk about this version. Now, is it as good as the first movie? In my opinion, it is not. There's a lot of reasons why, but it doesn't mean there isn't a lot of things that I find fun, and a lot of things that get really memeified, to be honest. Like, the cast is still very solid, except Jessica Alba, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Like, Ioan Gruffudd as Reed Richards is still really good in the role they gave him. Of course, this is not the Reed Richards that we know. I've explained that before. But I really like his charm they gave him, and that they kind of more enhanced him in this version, that he is more nerdy, he is more out of his depth. And it's funnier now because he's getting married with Sue, which is cool now. And him getting married is actually kind of funny from how they portray it, because you know how I said he's very smart, right? Well, because he's much more into his scientific knowledge and trying to figure out what's going on, he can't even focus on his marriage, which then gets him mad with his fiance, which I find actually kind of funny. That a marriage spat. The reason I like that is because they're getting more into them just being people who happen to get superpowers, which is something I always like. It goes into what Jack Kirby and Stan Lee wanted for them to be. Just normal people who happen to get superpowers, the first family, right? And I like that. And something I never mentioned was how they portray his abilities. I actually personally really like how they portray his ability. I know a lot of people probably don't. They say it's dated, it doesn't look right, but be honest, how are you supposed to make stretchy powers look right? I don't even think they're able to do that now, even what we got in the Fantastic Four trailer. But I really like what they did here. I love when it was his bachelorette party, how the way he was dancing, that was fun. I really liked how he basically uses stretchy powers to get his luggage on a plane. That was just funny. I really liked how they used it. They had fun with it. And I even liked it in the last film. I just never really mentioned it for some reason. Now that leads me into Jessica Alba again. You know how I said that there wasn't really much to find about the character they did with her? I feel like they did it worse here. And it's actually kind of confirmed. Jessica Alba, I feel, was done dirtiest in this film. And what's sad is I found out she actually really wanted to play this character and really wanted to bring it justice. The problem was how they directed her. Throughout this film, she felt very bland and boring and, not interesting at all. And it felt like she couldn't act, right? Well, it's not because she wanted to, because it turns out she actually really wanted to get the character right. But the directors kept saying, oh no, we just need you to be a pretty face. We need you to just be eye candy. Which they confirmed it now more for this. Because when she was acting when she was supposedly going to die in the end of the film, they had told her, don't look too sad, don't look too hurt, try to be very monotone. That just hurts. And you can tell that they were even trying to make her more into a sex symbol by the fact that when they do the whole switching powers plot, she gets Johnny's powers and then they revert them, they bring it back, right? Well, when she gets back, she's just naked, which doesn't make sense because we saw Reed having stretchy clothes outside of his suit, so he probably would have done that for everyone else, right? So I don't know why she doesn't have something like that. That's just stupid, and that just makes it worse. And again, I feel sorry for Jessica Alba. They were just trying to make her the woman of group, and I feel like that's just sad. They could have done so much more. Now, to be a little positive, this movie did introduce me to the fact that the Invisible Woman is the strongest out of the four, with her comment saying that she can put a force field inside someone's body and make it burst. But then they ruined it by her always having a nosebleed, which I never understood, to be honest. Now, how do I feel about the other two? Well, honestly, I think they actually did them really well, especially these two. I feel like they really understood the characters they were being, especially Michael Chiklis as the Thing. I liked the way he portrayed the Thing. I learned, too, that he loved playing the Thing. That is one of his favorite characters. So that's good that these characters actually like these characters instead of just actors playing a character just because it's a paycheck. But I liked his progression from the first film of accepting who he is, accepting that he is this rock monster, but not letting that stop him, especially now that, he is with Alicia and he is deeply in love. And I like that. And after rewatching this, I was surprised how much she was in this film and how she was interacting with everyone. I liked how more involved she was in this film. But I do wish there was a little bit more. And it pissed off Johnny, and I like that Ben still will rub it in his face, but he still cared about Johnny in the end of the day. And speaking of Johnny, Chris Evans did a heck of a job in this role. You know how I said that they didn't really make him really mature in the last film? Well, they took that lesson and said, you know what? Let's make an entire film about that. Because, yes, this movie says Rise of the Silver Surfer, but this movie is mostly for Johnny about maturing because with him trying to mature, telling Reed that, he wants to be seen as an adult by being called John. And I'll say, well, no one takes him serious. And I like that. And you can tell that, his kid immaturity does get him in trouble when he tried to get the Silver Surfer, and that caused him to have the ability to switch powers. And that's actually kind of cool, seeing how everyone felt about that and how everyone adapted to the abilities. And it was really cool because when Ben understood that Johnny could do that, guess what? Ben tried to have fun with it because then when he was able to have Johnny's powers, he was human and he enjoyed that. And you felt that. They pointed it out. And I thought it was funny. I liked that they were able to be sweet. And it wasn't that, he was just, oh, I miss being human. Yes, he missed it, but it just felt like it being nice, right? And it was funny seeing Johnny in the rock exterior. But then that's when it made me confused about the whole how Ben's powers work and why Johnny has hair and ears while Ben lost ears, if that makes sense. That's weird. Maybe it's just cheaper. I don't know. I like how it showed Johnny switched with Reed. Reed was really resourceful with abilities. When they were actually doing superhero work and, saving a Ferris wheel, he was able to use the heat immediately. He knew exactly how to use it, which I'm surprised how, but he basically used it to stick the Ferris wheel back in its place with Ben's help. But you saw his ingenuity with that, and I actually thought was really cool. And again, they just used the whole switching powers with Sue as an eye candy moment, which is sad. They could have done something actually really cool with that. But I guess they just didn't want to do that. Of course, that was just so stupid. But with the culmination of, that whole switching power things with everyone, I like that because of that, it made Johnny, distant. And he's already a very distant person. He's a playboy. He'll, sleep with whoever he wants and just have fun, right? But I like that in this film, it points out that that's just a very sad existence, especially for him, because you can see that he is annoyed with Ben and Alicia's relationship, as we saw with that one scene here that I love. This scene is one of the funniest thing in the entire film.
Question for you though. How do you guys
That's none of your business.
Okay, all right, I'm just concerned. I'd hate to wake up one morning and find out she was killed in a rock slide.
I'll show you a rock.
But it shows that, he's still likes having fun with him, but that it actually genuinely hurts him, even though he says that he's happy for them. And again, you get to see that, Ben still cares, because even though they find out that, Galactus, which I want to talk about a little bit, is ready to eat the world, Ben is already there that, he's there for him. He's there for Johnny, and their relationship always the best, which again gets me very worried that the new film won't do this right. Now, let's talk about the main man himself, the Silver Surfer. I honestly really love this version of Silver Surfer. Yes, this version is not 100% accurate to the comics either. There are still some inaccuracies, but I do love his aura in this film. It's just so cool, and especially how they used him. They had fun with him. Now, what's even more fun and interesting to find out is that this is actually two people technically. The voice is done by Doug Jones. Now, if that name sounds familiar, that's because he is the body of a lot of monster movie type characters. From what I know, he was Abe Sapien from the Hellboy series, at least the body of him. And I thought that was awesome. Yes, I know he was probably other monsters, but I actually don't know too much about him, so I won't really get into him. But he's done a lot of films as creatures, and that's really cool. And he was the body of the Silver Surfer. Now, the voice was done by Lawrence Fishburne, like a Darth Vader type thing. He is best known as Morpheus in The Matrix. He was Bill Foster in the MCU. That's cool. At least those are the main ones I know. He's probably in other things, but those are the main ones I know. And together, those two actors were able to do a phenomenal performance as the Silver Surfer. And if you didn't know, there was an actual suit. It wasn't just full CGI. They actually used a gray body anytime he was depowered or just didn't have his abilities. they would have an actual suit there so it would feel more real, which is actually very cool. And yes, after they would, just cover it with CGI for when he's on the board, which is, what can you do? But with that CGI, they had fun with the whole race between Johnny and the surfer. They had fun with the way how he moved upon the board, how alien-like, how goopy it was, and how fun it was. That was cool. And they made him seem very otherworldly, which I don't know how they were able to make this very cool while making Galactus whatever he was, which again, I will talk about in a little bit. Now, they did bring back Doctor Doom, which when I first saw that when I was really little, I was like, how? How did you come back? You were literally dead and turned into a human coffin with your metal pieces, if that makes sense. But then I rewatched the film and I noticed that the Silver Surfer went past him and it basically restarted his heart again. And then apparently when he got out, he took off his mask looking horrible, even worse, which makes absolutely no sense for Doctor Doom. Yes, I know this version of Doctor Doom is very different. Basically has electric powers instead of, his magical sorcery type abilities with, his brain. Which they kind of do here in like the most weird way possible with the Silver Surfer's board, which I found interesting. But apparently he was contracted by the government to track the Surfer because the Surfer basically fixed them somehow, which I still find so stupid. Like, I'm pretty sure the Silver Surfer can't, just make you look pretty again so they can have the actor's face and, do what they normally do, right? Which I never really liked how they do that. But that makes me kind of, just like not really care for this Doctor Doom impression. And in speaking of not liking Doctor Doom's coming back, I did not like what they did with Doctor Doom's costume here. The costume they gave him was worse than the first one. Yes, the first one wasn't as 100% accurate, but it felt the most like Doctor Doom. It was green. He had the hood. He had the green on the chest too. But here, no, he has a black hood. Nothing here at all. More in line with the Ultimate comics. And the only saving grace is when he used the Surfer's board, it did give him the Surfer's abilities, which made him look like magic, which was more in line to the comic version of Doctor Doom, which is appreciated, but why did it take him having to use the board to do that? And something I almost forgot to mention is that when he was locked up, he was in Latveria, so that was nice, in a castle, but they never did anything with that. Again, this was like one of the worst interpretations of Doctor Doom. Actually, the other one is... never mind about that. But I do appreciate the actor for everything he did. I actually started watching a lot more stuff from the actor, so that's good. I will put the actor's name here because I keep forgetting it. I apologize. Someone that I didn't really expect to really like here was the General. But honestly, when I rewatched the film, I actually really liked his performance, and also rest in peace to the actual actor who died a few years ago. But he actually did a really good job of being the foil to Reed. Him being too arrogant to understand anything Reed's doing, but also needing Reed. And I liked their banter between each other. Yeah, there wasn't as much, but I liked his very stern attitude about everything. And when he's, pushed into his place by Reed, which I love this clip in the first place.
I'm the quarterback. You're on my team. Got it? But I guess you never played football in high school. Did you, Richards?
No, you're right. I didn't. I stayed in and studied like a good little nerd. And 15 years later, I'm one of the greatest minds of the 21st century. I'm engaged to the hottest girl on the planet. And the big jock who played quarterback in high school, well, he's standing right in front of me asking me for my help. And I say he's not gonna get a damn thing unless he does exactly what I tell him and starts treating my friends and me with some respect.
It's still really cool that he kind of understood that he did need Reed, but he was so arrogant that he would bring in Doctor Doom for help, which again, I still think is extremely stupid, even in this movie's plot. And he dies in here too, so there's that. And the way he died, which is weird, it's like he's a PNG. So that was interesting. Now that leads me into the big fart cloud Galactus. I will never understand or defend their choice for ever making him this way. Not just because they made him a fart cloud, it's because in this world they did not need to make him that way, because they had all the comic book aspects about it. Everyone is wearing their comic suits. Yes, of course, it's a little different. They have the little badge instead of the big 4. Yes, the blue is a little darker. They didn't have their belt, but they still looked very much like the Fantastic Four. If you saw those costumes, those were the Fantastic Four too, right? They had all their abilities: stretching, turning invisible, turning into fire, being a giant rock monster. That's silly, but they had that all here, and they didn't treat it as stupid. That was their reality. They even brought the Silver Surfer, and they didn't make fun of that. They still treated it very legitimately. They even made a reason for him being named the Silver Surfer, because Johnny got too close and he tried to explain it, but then Reed basically said, like, "Your Silver Surfer." They didn't mess with it. He was an actual silver man with a surfboard, and that was done really well. Very comic book accurate, right? But no, we draw the line at giant man eating the world. That's where we draw the line. That makes absolutely no sense why they would do that. I don't know why they even had to bring him here, to be honest. And the only thing I can even think about, to somewhat quote-unquote defend this, is that in the Ultimate Comics, Galactus is a bunch of nanites. He's not the big Galactus that we normally know. He's just a bunch of nanites that kind of look like clouds, and that's his whole deal, which is, stupid. Even then, I don't like that. Yes, it's technically comic accurate, but even then, this is a far cloud. It's not a nanite either, so not good. And you can tell that they probably knew this was going to be bad. You know why? Because they had so much allusions to the regular Galactus. They would have his shape there. They would have him in shadow, so they would you can't see him. But they would make you excited to see him. So I don't get what they were doing here. That's just extremely stupid. I will never understand. And that's why this movie, I feel, isn't as good as the last one. Yes, there isn't as much of the comic bookiness in the first film, but they had fun with it. It felt very homegrown, if that makes sense. This one felt like a little more of a blockbuster hit, if that makes sense. It's a little darker. The gradient of the film is a little more blue, as they started doing later on, which I never understood. But that makes me very glad that in the new movie, they're just embracing the comic bookiness by making Galactus very big and very much comic book accurate. You don't have to explain that. He's just a big alien monster ready to devour the world. And it's probably going to be very sad. So even though this is bad and will never be good and never make any sense, even to my child mind as a kid who didn't really understand who Galactus was, I'm glad that it got us to have a Galactus in the new film to be comic accurate. And with the new CGI models probably looking a lot better than they could have at this time. So I don't know. Thank you, Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, for having a bad Galactus, so our new Fantastic Four movie will have a great Galactus. Good job. Now, there's some small stuff I almost didn't mention, so I just put him in the end of this video, that I actually really like the whole Johnny learning to grow up from this whole switching powers things. And at the end, he basically has all their powers, even though that doesn't really make any sense. But it's cool that, he was able to get all their powers and basically be the only real homage to the Super Skrull, who technically usually has all of the Fantastic Four's abilities. So there's that. And I loved how he used it. They had fun with that. And we know that this is probably the only time we'll ever see the Fantastic Four's powers combined in any way, because we know we will never see the Super Skrull done in the MCU, though, at least the way they did here, because of what they did in Secret Wars. And I'm glad that at least we got this here. And to me, I think the graphics still hold up. To me. So it could be nostalgia, but that's just me. But those are my thoughts on Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. What did you think? Did you like this movie better than the first one? Or did you not like it as much as the first one? I really like to know your opinion. What did you think about the fact that the Silver Surfer was here? And yes, I know that the new movie, they're having a female version of Silver Surfer, but that is not Norrin Radd. That is his wife. That is a what if she got recruited instead of Norrin Radd here. So I am completely fine with that. But again, what are your thoughts on the Silver Surfer himself? What do you think about the work of Doug Jones and Lawrence Fishburne together being one character? Did you like the little Darth Vader type thing they had there? I'd really like to know all your opinions. And what did you think about the big fart Galactus they had there? Please let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. But if there's nothing else, this has been Doing My. I hope everyone stays dirty, and I hope everyone has a good rest of your day. Bye!